The detection officers of the Galactic Concordiate nearly dismissed it as a sensor malfunction. The signal appeared without warning on the edge of charted space, a massive object moving at impossible speeds. Another gravitational anomaly, Lieutenant Vexnar suggested, his 4 appendages adjusting the sensitivity of the long-range scanners. The lieutenant had monitored this sector for 17 cycles without incident. Nothing interesting ever came from the uncharted regions. Senior Detection Officer Kraltek clicked her mandibles in disagreement. Gravitational anomalies don't maintain steady velocity or change direction. She magnified the signal pattern, revealing a deliberate course adjustment. This is a ship. A big one. Protocol demanded they report any unidentified vessels to Central Command. Within hours, Admiral Zextrol of the Vespidian Horde personally took command of the 3-cruiser response team. His carapace gleamed under the artificial lights of the flagship bridge as he studied the incoming data with compound eyes that had witnessed the subjugation of 17 species. "Prepare standard first contact protocols," he ordered, "and ready the integration teams." The Concordiate's approach to new spacefaring races never varied. Overwhelming display of force, demands for submission, then rapid assimilation into the hierarchy. The 12 species that formed the Concordiate had perfected this process over millennia. Those who submitted became servants, those who resisted disappeared. The Admiral's anticipation faded into confusion as the unidentified vessel emerged from hyperspace. Even veterans of countless encounters fell silent at the sight. The ship hung against the starfield like a predator from ancient nightmares, angular, black as void steel, and bristling with technology that defied Concordiate classification. "Magnify," Admiral Zextrol commanded, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. The view screen zoomed in on the vessel's hull. Most unsettling were the burn marks and impact scars along its surface, telling stories of battles survived and enemies defeated. Near what appeared to be the command section, unfamiliar symbols stood out in stark white against the darkness. UNSC Prometheus. Size comparison, the Admiral demanded. The tactical officer overlaid a silhouette of their flagship against the alien vessel. The Concordiate cruiser, pride of their fleet, appeared almost childish beside the newcomer. "Impossible," whispered Sub-Commander Dresvas. "Our intelligence networks would have detected a civilization capable of building such." Before he could finish, every communication system on the Concordiate vessels simultaneously activated. The unknown ship had bypassed their security protocols without apparent effort. On view screens throughout the 3 cruisers appeared the image of a bipedal being. Its skin was brown, its head crowned with black filaments pulled tightly back. Most striking were its eyes, dark, alert, and utterly unintimidated. "This is Captain Alina Reyes of Earth's United Defense Force." The creature spoke in perfect Concordiate standard, without translation delay or syntax errors. "Your government has taken our people. We've come to take them back." Admiral Zextrol recovered quickly, straightening to his full height. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Zextrol of the Galactic Concordiate. You have entered sovereign territory without authorization. Power down your systems and prepare for boarding and classification." A small expression passed across the alien captain's face, something the Admiral couldn't interpret. "Admiral," Captain Reyes replied, "I don't think you understand the situation. We're not here for classification. We've tracked your raiding parties to our outer colonies. We've documented the abduction of 3,417 humans." The bridge fell silent. The Admiral's antennae twitched nervously. The raiding parties were classified at the highest levels. How could this species know? "We've spent years studying your technology from the scout ships we captured," Rice continued. "We know about the labor camps. We know about the experiments. And now we're giving you one opportunity to return what you've taken." The Admiral signaled silently to his weapons officer, who began powering up the main cannons. Captain Rice noticed the subtle movement, and that small expression crossed her face again. This time, Admiral Zextrol recognized it. It was a smile. Admiral Zextrol had conquered 17 species across his career. He wouldn't be intimidated by primitives in a single ship. He signaled to his weapons officer, mandibles clicking in a pattern that ordered full combat readiness. "Unknown vessel," he announced, puffing his thorax in the traditional Vespidian display of dominance. "You will power down immediately or face destruction. The Concordiat welcomes all species as subjects." Inside the Pyromete EUS, Captain Reyes calmly sipped her coffee while studying the alien cruisers through enhanced tactical displays. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as her crew monitored the surrounding vessels. "They've activated weapons systems," announced Lieutenant Park at Tactical. "Energy signatures indicate charging of main cannons." Reyes nodded, setting down her mug on the armrest of her command chair. "Right on schedule." She turned to her XO, Commander Marcus Jackson, a tall man whose dark skin bore thin white scars around his neck, remnants of a Concordiat neural collar. 3 years in a Concordiat labor camp had left him with intimate knowledge of their technology and a quiet, focused rage. "Commander Jackson, are our guests ready for their demonstration?" Jackson's expression remained neutral, but something flashed behind his eyes. "Yes, Captain. Drone swarms programmed and ready for deployment." Reyes opened a channel to engineering. "Chief Tanaka, status report." Chief Engineer Hiroshi Tanaka's voice came through clearly, the background filled with the steady hum of the ship's revolutionary drive system. "All systems nominal, Captain. Phase shift technology standing by if needed." "Let's hope it won't be," Reyes replied. The Admiral's flagship fired a warning shot, a plasma burst that deliberately missed the Pyromete EUS by mere kilometers. The energy wake rocked the human vessel slightly. Reyes raised an eyebrow. "I believe that's our invitation to respond." "Lieutenant Park, activate protocol swarm." "Deploying now, Captain." From microscopic ports across the Promete EUS's hull, thousands of drones no larger than grains of rice emerged, propelled by magnetic fields toward the Concordiat vessels. Designed to mimic space debris, they passed through the aliens' defensive screens undetected. On the Concordiat flagship, Admiral Zextrol watched with satisfaction as his warning shot seemed to give the humans pause. "Prepare boarding parties," he ordered. "I want their captain brought to me alive for questioning." His instructions were interrupted by a sudden flicker of the bridge lights. Around him, officers reported similar anomalies across all systems. The tactical officer's mandibles chattered nervously. "Admiral, something is penetrating our..." The words died as every system on the flagship simultaneously shut down. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow across the bridge as the Admiral watched in horror as his other 2 cruisers went dark as well. Inside the human drones, quantum processors executed their programming. Infiltrate through weapon ports, locate control systems, and establish dominance without casualties. Within minutes, all 3 enemy cruisers floated powerless, their crews finding themselves trapped in ships suddenly controlled by human technology. Captain Reyes stood from her command chair. "Commander Jackson, prepare boarding team Alpha. Dr. Kumar, have medical ready to receive casualties." Jackson nodded grimly. "Permission to lead the boarding party, Captain." "Granted. Remember, Commander, we're better than them. No unnecessary force." 30 minutes later, Reyes stepped onto the Admiral's flagship, accompanied by Jackson and a small security team. They moved efficiently through corridors where confused Concordiat crew members stood with raised appendages, immobilized by targeted electromagnetic fields. They found Admiral Zextrol still on his bridge, his massive form trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. "How?" he demanded. "How did primitives develop such technology?" Reyes ignored him, instead moving to a sealed door at the rear of the bridge. "Commander, if intelligence is correct, we'll find them through here." Jackson pressed his palm against the security panel, uploading an override sequence. The door slid open to reveal a sight that made even the hardened commander pause. 20 humans, emaciated but standing tall, their eyes blazing with defiance despite their circumstances. They wore the tattered remains of colonial uniforms. "United Defense Force?" asked their apparent leader, a woman with gray-streaked hair. "Yes," Jackson replied, his voice thick with emotion. "We've come to take you home." As the rescued colonists were escorted to the Prometheus EUS, Rise finally turned her attention to Admiral Zextrol. "This is only the beginning," she told him quietly. "We're coming for all of them." News of the incident spread through Concordia space like wildfire. The Galactic Information Network, normally controlled with meticulous precision, couldn't contain the unprecedented security breach. Anonymous sources leaked security feeds showing Captain Rice walking unchallenged through the Admiral's flagship, her small team of humans neutralizing elite Vespidian guards with non-lethal efficiency. On 12 homeworlds, citizens gathered around public displays, watching the unthinkable. 3 Concordiate warships drifting powerless, their vaunted defenses overcome by a species no one had heard of before. In the sprawling Concordiate High Council chambers on Xendos Prime, pandemonium reigned. Representatives from 12 species shouted accusations at one another, their unity fracturing under pressure. The Vespidian delegate buzzed angrily, compound eyes flashing with indignation. "This human vessel has compromised our most secure military technology. Who gave them our encryption protocols?" The Morsidian representative's tentacles rippled with nervous energy. "Perhaps if your species hadn't been conducting unauthorized raids on uncharted systems, we wouldn't." Enough. The chamber fell silent as High Chancellor Trav Mach rose to his full 4-meter height, scales gleaming under the chamber lights. The massive reptilian species had founded the Concordia millennia ago, and his words still carried ultimate authority. "This is not a time for accusations, but for decisive action. Where is this human ship now?" The security chief, a diminutive Telvari with silvery skin, stepped forward reluctantly. "Chancellor, we've lost track of the vessel. It disappeared from our monitoring network approximately 6 hours ago." Angry murmurs filled the chamber. Nothing disappeared from Concordia tracking systems. Disappeared. Dravmach's voice dropped dangerously. 12,000 monitoring satellites, and you lost one ship. The security chief's skin paled further. "It appears to utilize some form of phase shift technology we haven't encountered before. We're adapting our sensors, but..." A sudden commotion at the chamber entrance interrupted him. A junior communications officer rushed in, protocol forgotten in her haste. "Chancellor, we've received reports of attacks on labor processing centers in the Cygnus and Eridani sectors." Trav Mach's eyes narrowed. The human ship. 2 facilities completely shut down. All Concordiate personnel incapacitated but unharmed. And she hesitated. "Speak." "All captive laborers missing. Over 300 humans freed." Before the implications could fully register, every light in the council chamber flickered and died. Emergency systems failed to activate, plunging the room into darkness. 12 seconds later, power returned, but the central holographic display now showed a new image. Captain Elena Reyes, seated calmly in what appeared to be her command chair. "Greetings, High Chancellor," she said, her voice remarkably composed. "I apologize for the interruption, but conventional communication channels seem to be restricted." Dravmach's ancestral ridge flared with anger. "How dare you breach Council security? Your actions constitute an act of war against 12 united worlds." Rice didn't flinch. "With respect, Chancellor, you declared war when you took our people. I'm here to propose a simpler solution than conflict." She tapped something on her chair's arm, and the display changed to show maps of Concordiate space with 23 locations highlighted. "These are your remaining facilities containing human captives. You have 72 hours to return all of our people and provide transport to coordinates we'll supply. After that..." She let the implication hang. "Impossible." Trav Mach snarled. "You have one ship. The Concordiate has thousands." Ray smiled that same small smile that had unnerved Admiral Zextrol. "To demonstrate our seriousness, She pressed another control, and across Xendos Prime, the capital world of the Concordiate, every power system simultaneously shut down. Transportation networks, security grids, orbital defenses, communication relays, all went dark in perfect synchronization. 10 seconds of absolute darkness engulfed the planet. When systems reactivated, Rise was still there, her expression unchanged. 72 hours, Chancellor. We'll be watching. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. For the first time in living memory, fear permeated the chamber of the galaxy's ruling elite. Dravmok turned to his military chief. Deploy everything we have. Find this ship. Destroy it. Outside, citizens looked skyward with newfound anxiety, wondering what manner of beings could challenge the Concordia with such apparent ease, and what their arrival meant for a galactic order that had stood unchallenged for 3,000 years. As the Concordiate frantically assembled its grand armada, activity aboard the Pyramiti HEUS continued with methodical precision. The warship had taken temporary refuge in the shadow of a rogue gas giant, its adaptive hull absorbing ambient radiation to remain undetectable. Chief Engineer Hiroshi Tanaka hadn't slept in 36 hours. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces in the engine room, refined movements guided by decades of experience. 3 junior engineers watched in reverent silence as he adjusted the phase shift matrix that allowed the Pyramiti HEUS to slit between normal space and the dimensional pocket humans had discovered quite by accident 15 years earlier. The Concordiate sensors operate on a standard quantum wave detection principle, Tanaka explained, not looking up from his work. They've never encountered dimensional folding because they've never needed to develop it. Their territory expanded unchallenged for centuries. Lieutenant Sato, his youngest engineer, frowned. But surely with 12 species combining their knowledge. They don't combine, Tanaka interrupted, finally looking up. His eyes were bloodshot but alert. That's their fundamental weakness. The Concordiate species hoard knowledge from each other, sharing only what's necessary for mutual defense. We recovered their classified archives from the Admiral's ship. Each member species maintains separate research divisions, separate military commands. They're allies of convenience, not collaboration. He made a final adjustment to the matrix, which hummed with a slightly higher pitch. Humanity unified out of necessity. We nearly destroyed ourselves before realizing cooperation was the only path to survival. That's why one human ship can challenge their entire empire. 2 decks above, Dr. Aisha Kumar moved efficiently through the medical bay, where 47 recently rescued humans were recovering. The captives had endured conditions designed to break both body and spirit, nutrient deprivation, stress positions, neural compliance collars. Yet, as Kumar examined each patient, she found herself struck by their resilience. You'll need regenerative therapy for the muscle atrophy, she explained to a woman named Collins, a mining engineer who'd been abducted from an outer colony 3 years earlier. But your body has maintained remarkable bone density despite the conditions. Collins managed a weak smile. We developed exercises we could do without the guards noticing. Taught each other to survive. Across the room, Commander Jackson interviewed other former captives, gathering intelligence about remaining labor camps. His expression remained professional, but the occasional tightening of his jaw revealed the personal cost of these conversations. The Vespidians run most of the processing facilities, but the Telvari conduct the experiments, explained a hollow-eyed man who'd been held in a research wing. They're fascinated by human adaptability, our ability to survive in environments that would kill them. Jackson nodded, recording every detail. Did you observe any weaknesses in their security protocols? Anything that might help us free the others? On the bridge, Captain Rice reviewed the tactical situation with her senior staff. Lieutenant Mateo Rodriguez led the intelligence team adapting Concordia translation software to access their military networks. They're mobilizing everything, Captain, Rodriguez reported, displaying intercepts across the holographic table. Over 9,000 ships converging from 12 sectors. They've never deployed at this scale before. His twin sister, Captain Sofia Rodriguez, commanding the ship's complement of advanced fighters, studied the projections. Their coordination is poor. Each species fleet maintains separate command structures, even when operating together. Reyes nodded thoughtfully. That's consistent with their social organization. They've dominated for so long they've never developed true integration. She zoomed the display to show the nearest Concordiate fleet movements. What about our next target? The labor camp in the Rigel sector is lightly defended, Sophia responded. Primarily a Morsidian facility with approximately 80 human captives, according to intelligence from the rescued colonists. Reyes made her decision. We'll strike there next, then proceed to the medical facility in Eridani. Dr. Kumar needs access to their research data to understand what they've done to our people. As the briefing concluded, Reyes gazed at the tactical display, showing thousands of Concordiate ships searching for them. The Pyrometeus was outnumbered 1,000 to 1, yet she felt a strange calm. This mission wasn't about military victory, it was about justice, and something more, introducing the galaxy to humanity on their own terms. What truly terrified the watching Concordiate spies wasn't the technology, but the humans themselves, a species that had survived 3 world wars, 2 near-extinction events, and countless natural disasters, emerging stronger each time. The Concordiate had never faced an enemy forged in such fire, united by such purpose, or driven by such unwavering determination. As Reyes plotted their next move, she knew the Concordiate still didn't understand what they were facing. They saw a warship, but the Pyrometeus carried something far more dangerous, the indomitable human spirit. The Concordiate Armada arrived with overwhelming force, 10,000 ships surrounding the coordinates where their most advanced tracking systems had detected a quantum signature matching the Pyrometeus. Ships from all 12 species formed a spherical formation 50,000 kilometers in diameter, weapons primed and ready to obliterate the human vessel the moment it appeared. High Chancellor Dravmok observed from his command ship, the most powerful vessel ever constructed by the Concordia. His scaled fingers drummed impatiently on the armrest of his command throne. "Where is this human ship?" he demanded. "Our deadline approaches." Admiral Lev Toth, replacing the disgraced Zextrol, consulted the sensor array. "We've deployed our full-spectrum detection grid, Chancellor. If they attempt phase shift transition anywhere within this sector, we'll detect them instantly." For 18 tense hours, the Concordiate fleet maintained position. Captains reported crew unease as Captain Reyes ignored demands for surrender, instead broadcasting historical documentaries about human conflicts to the Concordiate fleet. Confused alien commanders watched footage of ancient battles where outmatched human forces defeated superior enemies through cunning and sacrifice. "Psychological warfare," snorted Admiral Lev Toth dismissively. "A primitive tactic." Yet the images lingered in the minds of those watching. Humans fighting on despite horrific injuries, small forces overcoming larger ones through unexpected strategies, individuals sacrificing themselves to save others. As the 72-hour ultimatum neared its end, the Chancellor's patience expired. "Commence attack pattern Alpha. All ships target the projected coordinates." 10,000 vessels fired simultaneously, their combined firepower sufficient to shatter a small moon. At the center of their formation, sensors detected a small phase shift distortion. The Pyrometeus finally emerging from its dimensional pocket. The human vessel had no chance to deploy countermeasures. Energy beams and graviton torpedoes converged on its position, creating a blinding explosion visible across 3 star systems. Sensors confirmed the complete molecular disintegration of the target. Victory celebrations erupted across Concordiate worlds, broadcast through every channel. Chancellor Dravmok himself addressed the 12 united species, declaring the human threat eliminated and the Concordiate's supremacy reaffirmed. His triumphant speech was interrupted by a priority communication from Xendos Prime. The Chancellor's aide appeared. his normally composed features distorted with panic. "Chancellor, we're receiving reports of... It's impossible. A human warship has appeared in orbit around Sendos Prime. Our planetary defenses have been neutralized." Before Dravmok could process this information, similar reports flooded in from 11 other systems. Identical human warships had simultaneously appeared in orbit around each Concordiate homeworld. The destroyed ship had been an elaborate holographic trap containing just enough actual technology to register on Concordiate sensors, while the real Prometheus had split into 12 smaller craft using experimental modular technology developed specifically for this mission. On Sendos Prime, billions of Concordiate citizens looked up to see a human warship hovering directly above their capital city. Public communication systems activated without authorization, and Captain Rice's voice addressed the population directly. "People of the Concordiate, I am Captain Elena Reyes of Earth. Your leaders have lied to you. The ship your fleet destroyed was unmanned, a decoy containing no living beings. We could have deployed actual weapons instead. We could have ended your civilization today." Across 12 worlds, her message continued. "We choose a different path. Your government has taken our people against their will. Even now, they hide the truth from you about labor camps and medical experimentation conducted on sentient beings." In his command ship, Chancellor Dravmok watched in impotent rage as classified files detailing the abduction program appeared on public channels throughout Concordiate space. Records of raids, captive processing protocols, and experimental procedures were laid bare for ordinary citizens to see. "We could have ended you," Reyes concluded, her voice neither triumphant nor vengeful, but measured and resolute. "Instead, we choose conversation. Your leaders have 24 hours to open negotiations for the return of all human captives and reparations for their suffering." As the transmission ended, the human warships remained in position above each homeworld, a silent reminder of humanity's reach and restraint. In the command center of his flagship, Chancellor Dravmok faced the unthinkable. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Concordiate had been outmaneuvered, outfought, and morally exposed by a species they had viewed as merely another resource to exploit. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted irreversibly, and the Chancellor knew what few others had realized. This was only the beginning of humanity's ascension. The Grand Hall of Reconciliation on Sendos Prime had never hosted negotiations like these. Designed to intimidate supplicant species with soaring architecture and displays of Concordiate technological prowess, the hall now seemed excessive rather than impressive as Captain Reyes and her small delegation entered. Chancellor Dravmok and representatives from the 12 Concordiate species waited at an elevated table, their position of literal superiority undermined by the circumstances that had brought them there. Armed security personnel lined the walls, a formality rendered meaningless by the human warship still hovering above the capital. "Captain Reyes," the Chancellor began, his voice carefully modulated to project strength despite the situation. "The Concordiate welcomes this opportunity to resolve our misunderstanding." Reyes raised an eyebrow slightly. Misunderstanding is an interesting term for systematic abduction and exploitation, Chancellor. She gestured to Commander Jackson and Lieutenant Commander Nia Okafor, the ship's communications officer. Okafor stepped forward, a quiet but commanding presence. Born in Lagos and educated at the United Earth Diplomatic Academy, she had declined offers from the diplomatic courts to serve on the Prometheus specifically for this mission. "With your permission," Okafor said, activating a holographic projector. Above the negotiation table appeared documentation that made even the composed Chancellor flinch, evidence of corrupt Concordiate officials who had authorized human abductions without full council knowledge, locations of 23 additional labor camps, and proof that 3 Concordiate species had been experimenting on humans to harness their unusual adaptability. "We've accessed your sealed archives," Okafor explained, her voice resonant and clear, "including records predating first contact with humanity. The hologram shifted to show historical documents, identification profiles, and extinction orders for 5 previously unknown species. The delegates from the Morsidian and Telvari contingents shifted uncomfortably. Most stunning, Okafor continued, was the revelation that humans weren't the first victims. 5 other spacefaring races have been quietly eliminated by the Concordiate over the past 3 centuries, their populations reduced to manageable numbers, their resources harvested, their survivors scattered or placed in remote labor facilities. Murmurs spread through the Concordiate delegation. Several representatives appeared genuinely shocked, exchanging alarmed glances with their colleagues. "This isn't common knowledge among your own leadership, is it?" Rise observed. "Your compartmentalized power structure has allowed certain factions to operate without oversight." The Nilexian representative, an avian being with iridescent plumage, leaned forward. "These accusations, if true, represent violations of our founding principles. The elimination of sentient species was expressly forbidden in the Concordiate Charter. Yet it happened," Commander Jackson stated flatly, "and would have happened to us if we hadn't developed the technology to fight back." Throughout the chamber, subtle divisions were becoming apparent within the Concordiate delegation, those complicit in the abduction program, and those apparently unaware of its full extent. Captain Rice addressed the chamber with unexpected empathy. "We understand building empires through fear. We nearly destroyed ourselves the same way. Humanity's early history is filled with conquest, slavery, and exploitation. We learned our lesson through centuries of struggle and near-extinction events." She stepped closer to the Chancellor's table. "We're offering a different path forward, not just for humans, but for all species in Concordiate space, including those you've subjugated." The holographic display shifted again, showing the locations of non-human labor camps where other species were being exploited. The revelation deepened the fractures within the Concordiate leadership. "Our terms are simple," Rice continued. "First, the immediate release of all captives, human and non-human. Second, reparations in the form of medical aid and resources for the affected populations. Third, a restructuring of the Concordiate governance to prevent such abuses in the future." Chancellor Dravmok's ancestral ridge flared with indignation. "You presume to dictate terms to a 12-species alliance that has stood for millennia." "We presume nothing," Rice replied calmly. "We observe your society, study your history, and identify the fundamental flaws in your system. The Concordiate began with noble principles, but devolved into exploitation because power concentrated in unaccountable hands." She turned to address the entire delegation. "As we speak, the PROMETEU is continuing its mission, freeing not just human captives but enslaved members of other species. We're creating a coalition of the formerly oppressed, beings who have experienced the Concordiate's true nature firsthand." The revelation split the Concordiate representatives into clear factions, those who sought reform and those clinging to dominance. The Nilexian representative and 4 others moved physically away from the Chancellor, a symbolic gesture not lost on anyone present. "The galaxy is changing," Rice concluded. "You can change with it or be left behind. The choice is yours, but be aware. Humanity won't stand by while sentient beings are exploited, regardless of their species. That's a promise." As the negotiations continued into the night, news of the revelation spread across Concordiate space, igniting conversations that had been suppressed for centuries. A new order was taking shape, catalyzed by a single human ship that had arrived not just with superior technology, but with a revolutionary idea: justice for all sentient beings. 3 weeks after negotiations began, a Concordiate diplomatic vessel approached Earth for the first time. The sleek craft carried representatives from 7 Concordiate species, those who had broken with Chancellor Dravmok's hardline faction to pursue peaceful relations with humanity. The remaining 5 species, led by the Vespidians and Telvari, had withdrawn from the talks, retreating to fortify their core systems against what they termed human interference. As the delegation's ship entered Earth orbit, the aliens pressed against viewport windows, their expressions of awe translating across species boundaries. The cradle of humanity spun below them, a blue-green jewel wrapped in swirling white clouds, deceptively peaceful from this distance. "It appears ordinary," observed Niltfen, the Nilexian representative whose support had been crucial in fracturing the Concordiate's united stance. "Unremarkable, even." Ambassador Chen, appointed by Earth's Unified Council to manage first contact protocols, smiled slightly. "Perhaps that's the greatest deception of all." The delegation was escorted to a landing facility in Geneva, where Earth's governing bodies had prepared a measured welcome, neither overly military nor naively trusting. As the aliens emerged from their vessel, environmental sensors on their encounter suits registered data that made several delegates pause in surprise. "Your atmospheric composition contains numerous contaminants," noted the Mogravi scientist, his translucent appendages waving in agitation. "And your background radiation levels are elevated. Remnants of our industrial age and early atomic experimentation," Ambassador Chen explained. "Most areas have been restored, but Earth bears the scars of our development." What the Concordiate representatives discovered over the next 7 days shattered their preconceptions. Earth wasn't a unified paradise of technology, but a complex tapestry of cultures, environments, and societies still working through their own conflicts while reaching for the stars. The alien delegation witnessed humans living in Arctic research stations where temperatures would kill most Concordiate species within minutes. They observed desert communities that thrived in regions so arid that the Nilexians, evolved on a world of perpetual mists, required additional hydration supplements just to observe briefly from their shuttles. "How do your people survive such extremes?" asked Trellmore, the insectoid Ferellian representative, after visiting both a deep oceanic research platform and a high-altitude settlement in the Himalayas on the same day. "We adapt," replied Dr. Sanjay Mehta, their scientific liaison. "Humans evolved as generalists rather than specialists. What we lack in natural armor or specialized adaptations, we compensate for with behavioral and technological flexibility." Most puzzling to the visitors was humanity's social organization. Unlike the hierarchical uniformity of Concordiate worlds, Earth presented a bewildering diversity of governance systems, cultural practices, and philosophical approaches coexisting within a loose framework of shared principles. "You disagree so fundamentally, yet collaborate effectively," observed Niltfen during a council meeting, where representatives from 40 Earth nations vigorously debated resource allocation for a new Mars colony. In the Concordiate, such discord would trigger immediate intervention from dominant factions. "We've learned, painfully, that suppressing disagreement creates more problems than it solves," explained Councillor Nadia Volkov. "Unity through imposed conformity is brittle. Unity through negotiated compromise is resilient." Perhaps most shocking was humanity's approach to art and historical record-keeping. The delegation was escorted through museums, where humans openly displayed their most shameful historical episodes alongside their greatest achievements. Slavery memorials near monuments to liberation, war documentation alongside peace treaties. "You commemorate your failures?" asked the Mogravi representative, genuinely confused. "We study them," corrected their guide. "Those who forget history's darkest chapters are doomed to repeat them." When the delegation finally requested to observe Earth's military capabilities, the true purpose of their visit, they received another surprise. Instead of the massive fleet they had expected, they were shown relatively modest defense forces designed for flexibility rather than overwhelming power. "But the PROMETHEUS," began Trellamore, leaving the obvious question unspoken. Admiral Chandra, chief of Earth's defense forces, regarded the alien thoughtfully. "The PROMETHEUS represents what we can build when threatened, not what we maintain in peacetime. Earth allocates 12% of global resources to defense. The Concordiate averages 64%. Then where does the rest go?" asked Niltfen. "Education, medicine, arts, exploration," Chandra replied. "We learned long ago that a society focused primarily on dominance inevitably collapses from within. On their final evening, as the delegation prepared to return with their assessment, Ambassador Chen hosted them on a mountainside overlooking a sprawling city. As darkness fell, lights bloomed across the landscape like stars. Millions of individual lives interconnected yet distinct. "Your world is disconcerting," admitted Niltven. "You are simultaneously more fractious and more cohesive than we anticipated, more vulnerable and more resilient." Chen nodded. "That's humanity in essence, representative. We contain contradictions. We celebrate them. It's not always efficient, but it gives us perspectives that more unified systems often miss." As the delegation departed the next morning, they carried with them not just formal reports, but a fundamental unease. The Concordiat had expected to find either a warrior culture worthy of fear or a weak civilization they could eventually control. Instead, they discovered something far more unsettling. A species comfortable with its contradictions, aware of its flaws, and determined to forge a future that learned from rather than repeated its past. This revelation proved more disruptive to the Concordiat leadership than any weapon could have been. For how does one control a species that has already confronted its own darkest nature and emerged with both humility and resolve? 1 year after the Pyramidus first appeared in Concordiat space, the galaxy experienced an uncomfortable rebirth. The once monolithic alliance had fractured into 3 distinct power blocks: the reformed Concordiat, the Dominion, and the newly formed Coalition of Free Worlds. On Xendos Prime, now headquarters of the reformed Concordiat, the Grand Council chamber had been reconstructed. Gone was the elevated days where chancellors had once looked down upon supplicants. In its place stood a circular table where representatives from 7 former Concordiat species sat alongside delegates from Earth and 4 previously subjugated races whose surviving populations had been liberated from labor camps. Admiral Elena Rice, promoted from captain following the Prometheus mission, represented humanity at these proceedings. Her dress uniform now bore the insignia of both Earth's United Defense Force and the new Galactic Security Initiative. "The reconstruction of the medical facility on Proxima II is complete," reported Niltven, whose leadership had been instrumental in the Concordiat's reformation. "Former captives of all affected species have access to rehabilitation services." Across the chamber sat Councillor Ketlan, a member of a species once thought extinct, the Ardani, whose civilization had been systematically dismantled by Concordiat expansion 3 centuries earlier. The tattoos across her face marked her as a survivor of the labor camps, where her people had been worked nearly to extinction. "The genetic repository recovered from Telveri research stations has allowed us to identify 17,000 scattered Ardani," she announced, her voice steady despite the emotion visible in her 4 eyes. "Reunification efforts have begun." Not all news brought to the council table was positive. Reports from the borders with Dominion space detailed military buildups and increasingly hostile rhetoric. The Vespidian Horde and 2 allied species had rejected the new order, breaking away to form the Dominion, a militaristic faction openly preparing for eventual war. "High Marshal Zextral has consolidated power," reported Commander Jackson, now Earth's military attaché to the Council. The scars around his neck from the neural collar had faded, but the memory of his captivity remained sharp. "Intelligence suggests they've redirected 90% of their economic output to weapons development. They fear what they don't understand," Rise observed. "And what they fear most is freedom, not just for others, but for themselves." Beyond political realignments, cultural exchanges had begun between Earth and former Concordiat worlds. Universities on 7 planets now hosted human professors teaching everything from environmental adaptation techniques to artistic expression. In return, Earth welcomed scholars bringing knowledge from civilizations thousands of years older than humanity's recorded history. The most visible symbol of this new era was the expansion of the Prometheus initiative. What had begun as a single warship had evolved into an exploratory fleet. The original Prometheus, recommissioned with enhanced capabilities, led 15 vessels of mixed human and alien crews into uncharted regions beyond known space. Captain Sofia Rodriguez, formerly of the Prometheus fighter wing, commanded this expedition. Her brother Mateo, the intelligence officer, had remained behind to coordinate security operations against Dominion incursions. "We've lost contact with Outpost K-14, he reported gravely to the Council. The settlement included both human and Ilexian civilians. Recovery teams found only destruction. Such incidents cast long shadows over the fragile New Order. Yet for every act of violence, a dozen cooperative ventures took root. On distant worlds, children of various species exchanged stories about the legendary black ship that changed everything, though the details varied wildly depending on who told the tale. In private moments, Admiral Rice sometimes questioned the changes set in motion by that first confrontation. Standing at the viewport of her office overlooking the capital city, she confided her thoughts to her old friend, Chief Engineer Tanaka. "We came for justice. Hiroshi, did we find it?" The engineer, now heading the Joint Technological Exchange Program, considered the question carefully. "Justice is never complete, Elena. But we created the possibility for something better than what existed before." Below them, the rebuilt city hummed with activity as beings from 20 different worlds moved through its streets. The fear that had initially greeted humanity had gradually transformed into something more complex, respect mingled with caution, admiration tempered by wariness. The galaxy had discovered that humans were neither saviors nor conquerors, but something far more dangerous, catalysts for change, carriers of a contagious idea called freedom. As the Prometheus and its sister ships pushed into uncharted regions, they carried this idea like a banner, humanity's greatest weapon and most precious gift. On the frontier outposts where human ships docked alongside vessels from formerly subjugated races, new communities took shape, not defined by species or origin, but by shared values and mutual respect. These fragile outposts face threats from both the Dominion and unknown dangers lurking in uncharted space, yet they continued to grow. The Concordiat had shuddered when humanity's warship arrived, not knowing that the real revolution would come not from human weapons, but from human hearts, from the simple, dangerous belief that every sentient being deserved to chart its own course among the stars. As Admiral Rice prepared to address the Council regarding the Dominion threat, she glanced once more at the city below, at the imperfect, challenging, vital peace they had built. The Prometheus had arrived as a warship, but its greatest victory had been making war less necessary. That paradox, she thought, was perhaps the most human thing of all.